Chapter 3. He was in logic a great critic, profoundly skilled and analytic. He could distinguish and divide a hair twixt south and southwest side. Samuel Butler. Reducing syllogisms to the first figure. Introduction. In past chapters, we have discussed the four figures of the syllogism. The figure of a syllogism, remember, is a disposition or location of the terms in the premises. Syllogisms can be divided into four figures according to where the middle term appears in each premise. Of the four different figures, the first figure is the most straightforward and the one in which the validity is the easiest to recognize. For this reason, logicians have found ways to transform syllogisms in the other four figures into syllogisms of the first figure. The study of how to reduce other kinds of syllogisms to the first figure is also helpful in understanding the mechanics of the traditional syllogism. Once you're able to reduce second, third, and fourth indirect first figure syllogisms to the first figure, you will understand syllogisms much better. Two methods of reduction. There are two ways this can be done: direct reduction and indirect reduction. We will study the first kind of reduction, direct reduction, in this chapter. But first, let's consider the different operations we will use to reduce syllogisms of the second, third, and fourth figure to the first figure. The 19 valid moods. You will remember that out of the 64 different kinds of syllogisms, we know there are 64 because there are 16 different moods and 4 different figures. There are only 19 that are valid. Let us review them so that we can demonstrate how to reduce syllogisms. As we have seen, each valid syllogism has been given a name as follows: Barbara, Celarent, Dari, Ferio, Que Prioris, Caesar, Chemestris, Festino, Barocco, Secunde, Tertia, Darapti, Desamis, Detasi, Philapton, Bocardo, Farisan, Habet, Corta in super edit, Bramantip, Kamenes, Demaris, Fisapo, Frisison. Remember that the vowels in each of these words indicate the mood of the syllogisms. For example, Barbara indicates an AA syllogism with a conclusion that is also an A statement. What the consonants mean. We know what the vowels in the words above mean since we studied them in the last chapter. But what do the consonants in these words mean? The first consonant indicates the mood in the first figure to which each valid syllogism in the second, third, and fourth figure can be reduced. In other words, it tells you which kind of syllogism in the first figure you should end up with after it has been reduced. For example, notice that Caesar, a second figure syllogism, has the same first letter as Celarent, a valid mood of the first figure, both with C. That means that when a Caesar syllogism is reduced, it becomes a Celarent syllogism. If after you have done the reduction on a Caesar, it is not a Celarent, then you know you have done something wrong. All syllogisms and figures other than the first that begin with C will reduce to a Celarent if the reduction is done properly. Festino, on the other hand, or any other syllogism in figures other than the first, whose name begins with F, must reduce to Ferio. Likewise, any syllogism whose name begins with B reduces to Barbara, and any syllogism beginning with D reduces to Dari. That takes care of what each non-first figure syllogism must look like after it has been reduced to the first figure. But how do you do a reduction? The 4 operations for reduction. A reduction of a non-first figure syllogism to a first figure syllogism can be done in one of 4 ways. But how do you know which way to use? Once again, we look to the name of the argument to tell us which method you should use to reduce a syllogism to the first figure is dictated by other consonants in the name of the syllogism. The letters S, P, M, and C, when they appear in the body, for example, not as in the initial consonant of the syllogism name, indicate which type of reduction procedure to use. These operations are indicated as follows. S. Simple conversion of the proposition signified by the preceding vowel. P. Per accidens or partial conversion of the proposition signified by the preceding vowel. M. Mutatio or transposition of the premises. Make the minor premise the major and the major the minor. C. Reduction by contradiction. This is the indirect method of reduction through rather than to Barbara. It is signified by a non-initial C and is applied only to Barocco and Boccardo. This sounds complicated, but let's explain it by giving some examples. Let's take the following syllogism. No fish is a mammal. All whales are mammals. Therefore, no whale is a fish. First, we look to see what figure the syllogism is in. We see that the middle term, mammal, is in the predicate in both the major and minor premise. It is pray, a second figure syllogism. Second, we look to see what mood the syllogism is in. We see that it is EA. What is the name for an EA syllogism in the second figure? It is Caesar. The first letter in the word Caesar, C, tells us that we will be converting this syllogism to coherent, its first figure equivalent. Third, we look to see which of the letters that indicate the appropriate operations, S, P, M, or C, appear in the name Caesar. We notice that there is an S, Caesar. Then look back at our chart on the previous page to see what S indicates we should do. It says simple conversion of the proposition signified by the preceding vowel. We know, therefore, that we must convert the proposition signified by the vowel preceding the S in Caesar. Since E is a vowel that precedes a S in Caesar, and since the E is the first vowel in Caesar, we know that we must do a conversion of the major premise, which is an E statement. In order to do this, we must remember what conversion is. We discussed this in Chapter 9 of Book 1, in which we covered the 3 ways of converting propositions to other equivalent propositions. Let us review it for a moment. Review of conversion. We said in the previous book that there are 3 ways to convert statements to their logical equivalents: obversion, conversion, and contraposition. In the present case, in which we are trying to find out how to reduce Caesar, the S indicates we are to perform a simple conversion. This just means conversion as opposed to obversion or contraposition, the other 2 methods. In conversion, we simply interchange or switch the subject and the predicate. We place a predicate where the subject is and the subject where the predicate is. Reduction involving conversion. So let's interchange the subject and the predicate of our Caesar syllogism. We start with no fish is mammal, CE. All whales are mammals, SA. Therefore, no whale is a fish, RE. After we convert the major premise, we end up with no mammal is a fish, CEL. All whales are mammals, AR. Therefore, no whale is a fish, ENT. We see that whereas before we had a second figure syllogism, pray, we now have a first figure syllogism, subpray. Furthermore, they are logically the same syllogism, since in conversion we are changing one statement to another logically equivalent statement. Let's try another one. All men are mortal, DAR. All men are bipeds, AP. Therefore, some bipeds are mortal, TI. This syllogism is a third figure syllogism, sub. Its mood is AA. Now we know by looking at the lines we gave above that an AA syllogism in the third figure is Dorapti. We see that this name has in it the letter P, which is one of the 4 letters S, P, M, and C that indicate which operation we must perform in order to make the syllogism a first figure syllogism. In the case of P, the operation is partial conversion of the proposition signified by the preceding vowel. Review of partial conversion. What is partial conversion? Partial conversion is a kind of conversion, again, as opposed to obversion and contraposition, in which an A statement can be partially converted into an I statement. A partial conversion is accomplished by interchanging the subject and predicate, just as in ordinary conversion, and changing the quantity. For example, changing it from a universal to a particular statement. If, for example, I say all dogs are animals, I can partially convert it by interchanging dogs and animals and making it particular. If I do this, I get some animals are dogs. Reduction using partial conversion. The proposition indicated by the vowel preceding P in derapti is a minor premise, which we know to be an A statement. All men are mortal, DAR. All men are bipeds, AP. Therefore, some bipeds are mortal, TI. And by partially converting the minor premise, we get all men are mortal, DAR. Some bipeds are men, I. Therefore, some bipeds are mortal, I. Again, we see that we have an equivalent syllogism even though it is a different mood in a different figure. And note that it is a first figure dari. Reduction involving multiple steps. In order to reduce some syllogisms to the first figure, more than one step must be taken. This is indicated if the consonants S, P, M, and C appear more than once in the name of the syllogism you are trying to reduce. Let's take a look at this one. Some crows are carnivorous, DIS. All crows are birds, AM. Therefore, some birds are carnivorous, IS. This is a third figure syllogism, disamis. It reduces to dari since it begins with D. But there are three operations you have to go through to accomplish this. Look at the word disamis. It has three consonants that correspond to operations in the list we looked at above, disamis. Does this indicate that we have to do three different things to this syllogism in order to reduce it to the first figure? Yes, it does. The first S indicates simple conversion of the major premise, which is an I statement, since the S follows the I. The M indicates that we need to make the major premise the minor and the minor premise the major. The second S indicates that we do a simple conversion on the conclusion. In what order is this done? It's done in the order in which the consonants appear. In other words, you do a simple conversion on the major premise first, then transpose, for example, switch, the major minor premises, then do a simple conversion on the conclusion in that order. It is very important that you observe this order because if you do not, you will not end up with the correct first figure syllogism. Step 1 then would be to convert the major premise. Some crows are carnivorous. In doing so, we get some carnivorous things are crows. Step 2 involves transposing the major and minor premises, yielding the following. All crows are birds, some carnivorous things are crows, therefore some birds are carnivorous. We have one step left, which is to do a simple conversion on the conclusion, going from some birds are carnivorous to some carnivorous things are birds. Once this is done, we see once again that we now have a first figure, sub-pre syllogism, a dari. All crows are birds, DA. Some carnivorous things are crows, RI. Therefore, some carnivorous things are birds, I. We have covered S, P, and M, but have not covered C, which involves indirect reduction. Since it involves a very different procedure, we will leave its explanation to the next chapter. Summary. In this chapter, we discussed ways to reduce syllogisms of the second, third, and fourth figures to first figure syllogisms. We said that there are two kinds of reduction. The first is called direct reduction, and the second is called indirect reduction. In this chapter, we discussed direct reduction. In addition to the vowels in the syllogism's names, some of the consonants also have a purpose. The consonants S, P, M, and C, when they appear in the body of a syllogism name, indicate 4 different methods by which a syllogism may be reduced to the first figure. The method indicated by each of these letters is as follows. S, simple conversion of the proposition signified by the preceding vowel. P, per accidens or partial conversion of the proposition signified by the preceding vowel. M, mutatio or transposition of the premise. Make the minor premise the major and the major the minor. C, reduction by contradiction. This is the indirect method of reduction through rather than to Barbara. It is signified by a non-initial C and is applied only to Barocco and Boccardo. When one of these consonants appears in the body of a syllogism name, it indicates that the operation it stands for must be performed on the proposition indicated by the preceding vowel. Some non-first figure syllogisms must be reduced to the first figure by the use of multiple steps. We must use more than one step in any syllogism in which the letters S, P, M, and C appear more than once. When more than one of these consonants appears, the operations they indicate must be performed in the order in which the consonants appear.